If God were to engage in a number of iterations of the trolley problem, would we be able to recognize the pattern and determine whether he was a utilitarian or not? I mean, if anybody did that, you would be able to determine if they were a utilitarian or not. Yeah. I mean, why would it be different for God than anyone else? Anybody, if you keep giving different moral questions to somebody and see how they answer, at some point you will be able to determine their moral philosophy. So I don't think that's going to be any different from God. The only difference from God is going to be that compared to other people is that God's answers will be consistent with a specific moral philosophy. And I think if you ask humans, eventually you're going to see their answers contradicts their philosophy at some point, and they contradict their own answers into questions will be contradictory to each other. So I think that's would be, you would be able to, like, if you look at a human answering moral questions, at some point you realize that there's no consistent moral philosophy that is going to make any sense of this. You're going to realize that at some point it's more emotional urges and feelings that we have, even among the most rational one of us, even among the most rational one of us who think that we have a very consistent and not contradictory moral philosophy, even we eventually will answer in a way that will be contradictory to some other answers we gave before. And other people that haven't thought about moral philosophy will even be more contradictory, which is not necessarily a bad thing, because our moral intuitions. Okay, so we have moral philosophy, which is supposed to be consistent, and we have moral intuitions, which is a product of our evolutionary biology, and it's supposed to. It's there. Our moral intuitions, rather than moral philosophies, were meant to keep our tribe surviving. This is why our moral intuitions do not fit with any moral philosophy, because moral philosophies are looking at the civilized world and a global community of people and trying to recognize what moral philosophy is going to make this global community of 8 billion people function the best. Okay? Our moral intuitions are answering a completely different question. Our moral intuitions are like, how could we keep this tribe from going extinct? Right? So given that moral intuitions, our emotions are run by our moral intuitions, and nobody, no matter how logical, it's not going to be robotic enough to be able to completely reject all our emotions, at some point we will have contradictory answers to moral philosophical questions. And I think a God will be more like a robot. A God will be more like a robot because a God will not be contradicting himself. And given that a God cannot be contradicting himself, just like a robot, a God will not have free will. I mean, technically, we don't either. But any God that is forced by logic to answer the questions in a certain way is a God that has no free will.
Hey guys, if you want to join these streams live, get your comments and questions read by Ali and Armin and the guests, and most importantly, to get full access to the full video versions of all these episodes, become a patron. Link in the description below.